It was supposed to be a celebration of powerhouse women in Hollywood, an episode of The View, dedicated to legacy, evolution, and the complexities of fame. Jennifer Lopez was the headline guest, seated across from the co-hosts and fellow special guest, Gwyneth Paltrow. The atmosphere at first was electric. Smiles, shared stories, and laughter over industry anecdotes. Jennifer, there to promote both a new music project and her streaming series, spoke openly about reinvention, hustle, and staying grounded. Gwyneth, calm and cerebral as always, offered reflections on wellness, fame, and aging gracefully. But as the conversation turned to the subject of celebrity branding, how stars navigate authenticity while building empires, the tone subtly shifted. Joy Behar asked, "Do you think it's harder for women in entertainment to balance success and staying real with their audiences?" Gwyneth nodded thoughtfully, launching into her philosophy about transparency. "I think people see through the noise now. If you're still marketing a fantasy in 2025, you're not being honest. There's power in simplicity, not always spectacle." Jennifer smiled at first, but something in her expression shifted. "Are you saying I'm selling a fantasy?" she asked, eyebrow raised. The table quieted. Gwyneth, not backing down, responded, "I think some people still perform too much. Sometimes less is more." What followed was a moment of tension the producers hadn't expected or prepared for. Asterisk the audience, sensing something real and raw unfolding, went quiet. J.Lo leaned forward, her tone cool but clipped. "Look, Gwyneth, we come from very different worlds. You can afford to do less is more. Some of us had to build everything from the ground up. There was no shortcut, no family name, no safety net." The air thickened with silence. Sunny Hostin shifted in her chair. Joy Behar attempted to intervene with a joke. "Should I start the boxing bell now?" But it didn't land. Gwyneth's face remained neutral, but her posture had stiffened. "I'm just saying not everything has to be a spectacle," she replied. "Sometimes authenticity is quieter." Jennifer shook her head slowly. "Authenticity looks different depending on who's living it," she said, voice rising slightly. "You don't get to decide what's real for me." The tension broke the rhythm of the show completely. Producers backstage scrambled to figure out whether to cut to commercial. Before they could, Jennifer stood up. "You know what?" she said, adjusting her mic. "I didn't come here to be judged. I came here to talk about my work, not to be patronized." With that, she pulled off her earpiece and walked off stage. The studio audience gasped. The camera panned to the hosts, all visibly stunned. Asterisk the incident quickly exploded online. Within minutes, clips of Jennifer Lopez's exit were circulating across social media platforms. Spliced with captions like J.Lo versus Gwyneth, Live Who was out of line, when keeping it real goes off script. Twitter ignited with debate. Hashtags like hashtag Team J.Lo and hashtag ViewClash trended globally. Some praised Lopez for standing up for herself, calling her response a masterclass in self-respect and refusing to be condescended to. Others accused her of being overly sensitive, arguing that Gwyneth's comments weren't personal. As usual, the internet chose sides, each interpreting the same footage through different cultural, racial, and generational lenses. Gwyneth, for her part, remained composed. That afternoon, her rep issued a carefully worded statement emphasizing respect for all women navigating the complex intersection of fame and identity. Jennifer's camp responded 24 hours later, saying only that she spoke her truth and stands by it. Meanwhile, The View saw a massive ratings spike. The moment, while unplanned and tense, proved to be one of the most viewed segments in the show's recent history. Even critics who usually dismissed daytime TV as fluff were suddenly interested. Think pieces flooded in. Was this about feminism, class privilege, media tone policing, or all of the above? The conversation went deeper than gossip. For once, a celebrity spat had opened a window into something much larger than showbiz drama. Asterisk behind the scenes, producers scrambled to manage the fallout while also capitalizing on the viral traction. Internal sources later revealed that no one on the View team had anticipated the conversation would spiral so dramatically. What was meant to be a celebratory crossover of two A-list icons had inadvertently become a cultural flashpoint. In private circles, Jennifer's team stood firmly behind her actions, citing long-standing frustrations with being undermined by a certain kind of subtle elitism in media spaces. Gwyneth, meanwhile, maintained that her comment was taken out of context and not intended to provoke. The two women reportedly didn't speak after the show. Now, future appearances involving either were quietly reviewed by booking teams, wary of repeating the same combustible mix. Interestingly, the clash reignited discussions around the coded expectations placed on Latina performers like Lopez, particularly when placed beside more traditionally media-accepted figures like Paltrow. Cultural analysts weighed in, suggesting the divide wasn't just personal, it was systemic. Jennifer's walk-off wasn't simply a moment of heat. It was interpreted by many as an act of defiance against a media structure that often pits women against one another, especially when one represents grit and hustle and the other inherited ease. The dust was far from settled. Whether intentional or not, Jennifer Lopez had made a statement, and the world was still reacting. Asterisk, as the days turned into weeks, the ripple effect from that tense moment on The View didn't die down, it expanded. Jennifer Lopez returned to her usual promotional schedule. But interviewers now tiptoed more carefully, aware that she wasn't afraid to push back if lines were crossed. Her fanbase grew louder, not just in support of her music or films, but as defenders of her right to assert boundaries in public forums. Gwyneth Paltrow, on the other hand, kept relatively quiet, continuing to post lifestyle content while avoiding direct mention of the clash. Yet even her silence became a conversation. Was it composure or avoidance? Publications from Variety to The Atlantic weighed in, dissecting the moment through lenses of race, respectability politics, and the conflicting expectations placed on high-profile women. One editorial noted Lopez's reaction wasn't disproportionate. It was the culmination of decades of being asked to justify her worth in rooms where legacy often speaks louder than effort. Meanwhile, The View quietly edited the official episode upload, trimming certain exchanges while retaining enough tension to keep views soaring. It became clear that what was intended as a routine promotional interview had exposed an uncomfortable cultural truth, that even in spaces meant to uplift women, old hierarchies still echo. Whether fans saw Lopez as a hero, a firebrand, or just someone who'd had enough, one thing was certain: her decision to walk off wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a broader reckoning. Asterisk. The cultural resonance of the Lopez-Paltrow clash extended far beyond a few viral clips or headlines. It became a litmus test for how different audiences perceive power, tone, and identity in the entertainment industry. College campuses discussed it in media studies courses. Panels on news networks debated it in segments about feminism and intersectionality. Even younger fans on TikTok used the moment as a springboard for personal commentary, drawing parallels to workplace microaggressions and coded language they'd experienced themselves. The phrase, "You don't get to define my authenticity," became a sort of rallying cry across comment sections and threads. For Jennifer, who had spent decades being underestimated, stereotyped, and scrutinized, the moment validated her evolution. Just as an artist, but as a woman, unwilling to apologize for her presence. Her team doubled down, quietly shifting the tone of her next promotional campaign to lean into empowerment and control. Meanwhile, The View quietly distanced itself from the incident on air, though insiders admitted privately that they hadn't seen numbers like this in years. For Gwyneth, the aftermath was more muted, though not without consequence. Some of her brand's longtime followers began to question her tone, while others defended her as simply misunderstood. But the deeper conversation persisted. This wasn't just a celebrity spat. It was a cultural flare-up, exposing the friction between privilege and perseverance, image and identity. And in that space, Jennifer Lopez stood not just as a superstar, but as a symbol of something bigger. Asterisk. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer Lopez chose to address the incident publicly, but on her own terms. During an exclusive sit-down with a respected Latina journalist on a streaming network, she was asked directly about what happened. Jennifer didn't dodge. "I've worked too hard, for too long, to stay silent when I feel disrespected," she said. "There comes a time when silence isn't grace, it's erasure." Her words struck a chord. She explained that her frustration wasn't just about The comment, but the pattern, the subtle undermining that women like her had been navigating their entire careers. She acknowledged that Gwyneth may not have intended harm, but also made it clear that intent doesn't erase impact. "We can disagree," she said, "but don't diminish me because my journey doesn't look like yours." The interview was widely praised for its clarity and strength, and clips of it quickly circulated. With support pouring in from fans, fellow artists, and women who saw themselves in Lopez's story, meanwhile, Gwyneth's camp remained mostly silent, with no follow-up interviews or clarification to see.